The Edmonton Oilers are tied for the worst save percentage in the entire NHL. Something needs to change. And on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, who the Oilers can realistically target to improve between the pipes.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. This is my 10th season doing digital hockey content, my third as a host here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day and has helped make Locked On Oilers the #1 sports podcast network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this NFL season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. On today's edition of Locked On Oilers, we're going to talk about what everybody is dying to talk about, goaltending. We will start out today's show talking about why getting fair market on the goalie, why getting fair value on the goalie market, words are hard sometimes, is hard, both as a team looking to acquire a goalie and as a team looking to sell one. In our second segment, we will go through a list of candidates I have accumulated over the course of the weekend to put into our conversation. And then in our final segment, I will do my best to give you a realistic timeline and why it is so pertinent the Oilers do not delay. So to start out, if you're not aware, if you're new, if you're not an everydayer, if you're an occasional listener, maybe this is your first episode. Well, if it's a first episode, hello, glad you're here. If not, you know goaltending is voodoo. You know that for the vast majority of NHL teams across the league today, they are going on a year-to-year basis with their netminder. The goal, if you are a team that does not have an Igor Shesterkin, an Ilya Sorokin, an Andrei Vasilevsky, Sergei Bobrovsky, if you don't have one of those bell cow 50 to 55 start guys, you're praying to the hockey gods that you will find the right goalie on the goalie carousel, somebody who's going to come in at 5 or 6 years for between $5 and $6.5 million per year. That is the going rate for an average NHL starter who can on occasion flash. The goalie market is tricky for a variety of reasons. To start out, goalies do not line up contractually with the general way players get paid in our league. If you don't know the specifics, you can become an unrestricted free agent for the first time at 27 years old or after you have accumulated 9 years of NHL service. After that period of time has passed, then you are eligible for unrestricted free agency. The problem here for goalies, most of them are not going to make an NHL debut until they are 23, 24, maybe even as late as 25. And because you're starting on that later timeline, you are closer to unrestricted free agency, but there's a double-edged sword there. You don't have a huge track record. Generally, goalies are eased into a starter's workload. They get moonlight as a backup for a season or two. They perform reasonably well through 20 or 30 games as the backup. And then based on doing that for a couple seasons, a team will make a decision. Are you a product of us, or do we think you can elevate us? And we watch year after year as teams get back on the goalie carousel and they roll the dice on a backup. They roll the dice on a veteran in their late 30s, or they roll the dice on somebody who is entirely unproven. We spent a good chunk of the summer lamenting the fact that Alex Lyon was out there waiting to be signed, and the Buffalo Sabres ultimately picked up Alex Lyon. Of course, they also at one point signed Alexander Georgiev and have had 4 different guys start NHL games for them already this early in the season. And that's a team that has Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, somebody who's under contract for a couple more seasons and has had one good NHL season, and Devon Levi, a prospect goalie we have been waiting for to make an NHL debut and establish himself at this level, but has by and large been stuck as an AHLer, and he's played reasonably well in the AHL. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Both of those guys I had mentioned, Pekka Luukkonen and Levi, are subjects in our second segment. So to circle back around, and that is why, being that it is so hard to find a starting goalie, that's why teams jump through hoops. That's why, even though Stuart Skinner played really well for one season, The Oilers were willing to hitch themselves to the Stuart Skinner wagon. They were going to be in the Stuart Skinner business. He demonstrated for one NHL season the capacity to be an average NHL starter. And in this league, that is nothing to take for granted. And it is why the Oilers have been so reticent to move on from him, because they think that's in there. Of course, and very important, Stuart Skinner has 3 subsequent seasons of play demonstrating that he is not a 50 to 55 start guy at a high level. And anybody could start 50 to 55 games if the quality doesn't matter. You listening or watching this show could play goalie for the Oilers if the results don't matter. But being that this is the NHL and the results do matter, the Oilers need more. It is that straight up and that straightforward. And the conversation around goalies, particularly guys like Stuart Skinner, is the exact same conversation we have in the NFL about quarterbacks. And quarterbacks, to a similar degree, are evaluated in similar pockets of time where they are either on that carousel, bouncing from landing spot to landing spot, looking for the right situation, or you have one of the franchise guys, or you have an unproven guy. And there are plenty of examples of this. You look at Case Keenum with the Minnesota Vikings the year they ultimately went to the NFC title game and lost to the Eagles. Keenum put together a really good regular season. The Vikings did not think he could replicate those results. They went out and signed Kirk Cousins. The Atlanta Falcons, they had signed Kirk Cousins. He got injured. He blew out his Achilles. They drafted Michael Penix. The Vikings last year said, Sam Darnold, we don't think you can do this again. You are a Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell merchant. We are going to let you go. We drafted J.J. McCarthy. He is going to be our starter of the future. And you look how that's going. You look at the Brock Purdy, Mac Jones situation in San Francisco. Environment is the strongest indicator of success for the most part, because there are so few players who can defy their environment. We're talking at the quarterback position, 5, maybe as many as 8. But for the most part, you need a certain baseline level of competency around you. And for Oiler fans, what's so frustrating is there is a baseline level of competency around the goalie, but the goaltending has been so subpar. As we said, tied for the worst save percentage in the entire NHL through these first 27 games of the season. This is a team that dramatically needs to improve its performance. This is a team being sank by its goalies. And fact check, 26 games, not 27 games, excuse me there. But in continuing our conversation, and I'm looking over here on my note sheet, there is a certain gravitas that a starting franchise caliber goalie has. Most importantly, number one, it is a mindset. It is a mentality. And we talk about this all the time. Short memory, short memory, short memory. Greg Olson, the NFL commentator, made a great point about this. You don't want your guy scared. You want your guy willing to take chances, to be aggressive, and to make the plays they're capable of making. The second you sap a guy of his aggressiveness and he gets in his own head, you lose what makes that guy competitive. And for Skinner, who is not a great athlete, who struggles getting from post to post, who has to rock himself into position to build momentum to get over, and it is why he struggles so harshly with rebounds and getting himself square back into position, he does not have the great physical traits. His mindset is not particularly great. And look, body language doctor is not a profession, but anytime he gives up a bad goal, he immediately sulks his shoulders, his head dips down, and we're asking ourselves, this is supposed to be the professional athlete. He and I can't have the exact same reaction to when a bad play happens. He has to have the capacity to move past it. And I'm one of the guys who feels bad for him. There are a lot of people out there who don't really care how Stuart Skinner feels about this situation. And I've said it a lot. He is a victim of his own success. If that rookie season doesn't go as well as it did, the Oilers are not presently in a situation where Skinner is starting all of these games and where the Oilers have the worst goalie tandem in the NHL. We are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you, other than Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Devon Levi, who the Oilers could be targeting and their results the last couple of years. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place live bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is at its best when the game starts to shift, when a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or a momentum swinging turnover. FanDuel lets you jump in the moment right away. With live spreads and money lines that adjust play after play, player props that update as players heat up, and you can bet things like next touchdown scorer, drive results, game totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. And don't look now, friends, it's only Tuesday. Thursday night football this week, barn burner. Cowboys at the Lions. The Cowboys coming off the huge Thanksgiving Day win. The Lions coming off a Thanksgiving Day loss. The Lions are 3-point home favorites up in Ford Field in Detroit. And if you want to be in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you so much to everybody that is hanging out on this edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you to everyone that has made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. And thank you to everyone that has helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network. So I'm not going to do a drum roll. This isn't National Lampoons. No, but there are not a lot of candidates out there. I'm going to be honest with you. There is a motley crew of candidates out there that is struggling in various ways. There is a motley crew of guys that, for whatever reason, are available one way or another. Now, it is imperative to understand that just because a player is available does not mean they are being shopped. Just because a player is available does not mean they have the capacity to get out of whatever situation they're in. And as we all know, the trade market requires two to tango. And teams out there are aware the Oilers are in this awkward situation as far as their goaltending goes. And because these other teams know the Oilers are in desperate need of a goalie because of where they are at their window of contention, because of the commitments they have made to players like McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Ekholm, Wallman into the future, they desperately need to correct this situation as soon as possible. And because of that, teams are going to drive the Oilers a harder bargain. In addition, because the standings in both conferences are so compressed to the degree they are right now, teams are going to be a lot less willing to sell early. And an Olympic year makes the calendar a little fuzzy. Generally speaking, we see that first big trade usually end of January, early February. We saw JT Miller last year. We saw Noah Hannafin a couple of years ago. That trade usually happens a bit before our final deadline. And deadline day, by and large, has kind of died down to some degree. You got one funky one. You had Marchand last year. But by and large, this type of trade is hard to execute. The deadline goalie acquisition is not easy. The most prescient one that comes to mind was Ryan Miller going from the Sabres to the Blues back last decade. Miller was having a really good season. He was on a bad Sabres team. He went to St. Louis. The Blues got bounced in the first round. But trading for a goalie is really challenging because it is so environmental. It is really difficult to understand how a goalie that plays for the Devils would play for the Oilers, how a goalie that plays for the Predators would play for the Kraken, if you will. And it's not like football where this is a scheme thing and certain quarterbacks have stronger arms or more mobile legs and they have different facilities, different capacities. Goaltending is environmental. It is a vibes position. And you can do a lot to facilitate good goaltending as a team. And we'll talk about that in our third segment about the fact the Oilers are still playing reasonably passable defense, even though it's not great. And because of their offense being so poor, it's really killing them as far as defense and goaltending goes. But our list of candidates right now, number one, he's in the AHL, Mikey DiPietro in the Bruins system. His last 3 years, his record in the AHL is really good. 18-9-2, 26-8-5, 9-2-0 this year. 918 save percentage, 927 save percentage, 936 save percentage over the last 3 years, going up the right direction the closer we've gotten to the present. DiPietro does not have a big NHL track record. This is a goalie who does not have a clear path to starting at the NHL level full-time. He is blocked by Jeremy Swayman, who signed a long-term extension at the start of last year. This is why it's tricky for these goalies to break through. On his own, DiPietro has probably accomplished all he needs to at the AHL level to be proven worthy of an opportunity to start, not as a full-time starter, but as a backup, as a A-B tandem goalie. And then eventually, based on how those results go as a backup or in a tandem, he could, in the not-so-distant future, prove himself worthy of being a starter. DiPietro is probably my favorite person on this list because I think his AHL track record is strong enough, and he doesn't have a path to regular playing time. And the Bruins don't need present-day players. The Bruins are a team that is in a state of flux, that is looking towards the future, that is looking to get younger, that is looking to get cheaper. Do you want to burn an Ike Howard or a Matthew Savard on a player like this? No. I think you could probably get Mikey DiPietro for a third-round pick, maybe a third and a fifth if you really had to sweeten the pot for the Bruins. But this is an acquirable player. He doesn't have a huge cap hit. He doesn't require a huge extension. This is a player who is hungry, who wants to play, who comes from an organization, Boston, that generally develops pretty good goalies. You look at the success Daniel Vladar had, at least to start the year in Philadelphia, his track record up in Calgary after leaving the Bruins. That's a player that's turned out pretty well. You went from Tim Thomas to Tuukka Rask to Jeremy Swayman. You have executed the goalie handoff really well more than once. And I am inclined to trust that, even though I think the Bruins at large have struggled to develop players beyond the goaltending position. After Mikey DiPietro, we come to that Sabres tandem we talked about in our first segment, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and Devon Levi. Pekka Luukkonen, 27, 22, and 4. 24, 24, and 5. So far to start this year, 3-3 and 1. 910 save percentage, 887 save percentage, 891 save percentage so far this year. This is a player who can't stay healthy, which scares me, being that the Oilers are going to be in a position where they need to give up assets for him. His contract is not insane. He's making a little more than $4 million per year. He is someone who I think in the right environment could be pretty good, but has yet to really string together anything beyond that one season. 2 years ago, I had him 4th or 5th in my Vezina ballot at the end of the season for the Locked On Awards. I thought he did a remarkable job on a Sabres team that wasn't very good. Since then, the team has really taken a dive. Lindy Ruff hockey is not the easiest on your goalies. Devon Levi only really has one full AHL season. This is a player who has struggled with staying healthy as well. 25, 13, and 3, 919 save percentage a couple years ago down in the A. That's a player that I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing in here to replace Stuart Skinner. He has not proven the ability to be a starter at the NHL level. I think if you could get Levy as your backup, as someone who would play in a tandem, I'd be amenable to giving the kid a shot to start 15 to 20 games over the final 57 or so the Oilers have remaining this season. Turning over to my next page, the list is not as awe-inspiring. You get to UC Saros, who at his price point, I just don't think is tenable for the Oilers at $7.75 million per year for the next 7 years. I don't see the Oilers being able to take that on without being able to send money out. The Oilers have 12 different players with varying degrees of no trade protection. I don't think the Predators want any of those dead weight contracts. Look, if you could find a way to get Nurse going the other way and making the money work on the back end, by all means. I don't think you're going to get Nashville to take Darnell Nurse. I don't think you're going to get Darnell Nurse to waive his no movement protection to go to a bad team like Nashville. Then I have 2 veterans. These are 1-year guys. They're both on expiring contracts. Jonathan Quick's doing an okay job with the Rangers as the backup. He's been there a few years now. I liked him as a fit last year at the deadline. The Rangers were going nowhere fast. He didn't have a great year last year. He's re-upped to stay, probably his last go-around at the NHL level. We get a little bit closer to the deadline. If the Rangers are out of it, I could see a world where they'd ask him if he wanted to go to a winner or if he wanted to stay at home in Connecticut with the Oregon retire a Ranger. And then last but not least, Freddie Anderson towards the end of the road in Carolina. They've been waiting for Kochetkov to seize the reins there. And I'm not a huge Freddie Anderson guy. I don't think he's a massive upgrade, but I do think his regular season results are pretty strong. I think the results he has gotten both in Toronto and Carolina in strong environments where they have generally been good possession teams indicate if the Oilers can get a little bit better at 5-on-5, he might be able to produce a bit better than his numbers. We are going to take our second and final break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we come back, I'm going to tell you why time is of the essence and why sooner is better than later. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, my mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, over 90% of top college and pro teams. I love using Drip Drop as part of my morning routine. I am big on trying to reset my brain lately. I've been leaving my phone on the other side of the room, trying to have 8 to 12 ounces of water before I pick up my phone, reading a little bit from a physical paper book, mix in a packet with my water, get my day off to a good start. And most importantly for me, it actually tastes really good. It doesn't taste fake. It doesn't taste artificial. And it's a secret weapon for staying sharp and refreshed throughout the day. Hydration has always been a non-negotiable for me. Drip Drop takes it to a whole nother level. And right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners like you 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now for the winter bulk and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Thank you so much to everyone that is hanging out on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are making our way through an Oilers goaltending conversation that continues to rage on by the day. And you have heard Elliot Friedman, you have heard Bob Stauffer, you have heard a litany of national and Oiler reporters say the Oilers are not actively shopping for a goalie at this moment. And some of that, I would think, has to be conjecture. I don't think it benefits the Oilers in any discernible capacity to advertise what they are looking for. Now, we all know that if the Oilers were not seriously looking for a goalie, it would be negligence. But if it's out there through the media, the Oilers are looking for a goalie, the intensity only ramps up. And goaltending effectively becomes a game of musical chairs, and you don't want to get caught when the music stops. That's the reality the Oilers are in right now. While it seems like there are a litany of goalies available, guys are going to sign extensions, guys are going to get hurt, and teams are going to roll the dice. And depending on your tolerability for risk, you might look at this different ways. You look at it from a Stan Bowman perspective, and we heard it at the end of last year. We heard it about John Gibson over the summer. The Oilers did not feel that the goalies that were out there were a discernible improvement from Stuart Skinner, so they chose to allocate resources elsewhere. Trent Frederick, Mangiapane, Wallman extension. While I understand how they came to that conclusion, I do think they are running the issue that appearances matter. The Oilers are in a position where they made the Stanley Cup final 2 years in a row. And for most people, for casual observers, they look at Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard as the fundamental flaw, the reason the Oilers did not win the Stanley Cup. And for the most part, I didn't feel that Skinner or Pickard was detrimental in the Cup final itself either year. I think a better goalie could have stolen them a game, and that's a different conversation. But the Oilers know they are looking down the barrel at a lost season. And when you have McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard at varying degrees of their prime, you don't get to waste years. And bringing up the math here, and excuse me, I had to pen and paper, calculator, double check, triple check just to be sure. The standings math is not very kind right now. The Oilers have played 26 regular season games. Through 26 regular season games, the Oilers have an .865 save percentage. They've conceded 95 goals against in 25 games, almost 4 per game. They are a .519 points percentage team. They're on pace for 85 standings points. That would be 10 short of the last wild card. To make the wild card, the second one, they would need to play 6-10 hockey rest of the way. So 61% of the games, they would need to get points out of them. The Oilers concede 26.5 shots on goal against per game. At their present .865 save percentage, they're conceding almost 4 full goals a game. If the Oilers got 900 goaltending that would come down. That would be only 2.2 goals against per game. If they got 905 goaltending, it'd be even lower. It would be 2.4 something, and 910 even lower. So my point being, the Oilers don't need Igor Shesterkin, UC Saros. They don't need Ilya Sorokin or Vasilevsky or Bobrovsky or Ottinger. They don't need a world-class goalie in here. The way the defense plays, most nights, if you have a 905 goalie in here, that's going to be more than enough to get the job done. And Skinner can do that from time to time, but he's not bankable. He's not consistent. And if you're a consumer, which in our late-stage capitalistic hell, you have to be, you understand that for most part, when it comes to consumer goods, you get what you pay for. If you buy cheap furniture, it's going to break. If you buy expensive furniture, your expectation is that it's going to last, or there's going to be some type of consumer protection to replace it should it break down. And the Oilers don't need designer handbags or shoes. They need a pair of running shoes and a pair of basketball shorts. It is not unrealistic. And I think that's why Oiler fans at large have reached a tipping point. We've seen 2 straight years of this goalie tandem. And other than the conference finals of each of the past 2 years against Dallas, no one has ever felt great about this goaltending tandem. We all keep waiting for Skinner or Pickard to turn into a pumpkin. And this year, the Oilers have 2 pumpkins. And this is a miserable place to be because every single night, every guy who goes out there to skate in front of both goalies is walking on eggshells because they know if they make one mistake, it's ending up in the back of the net. And Oiler fans have every right to be angry. Oiler fans have every right to demand they get league average goaltending in here. That is not unreasonable. And you have to pick and choose your battles as a fan, what's going to annoy you, what's going to rile you up. I don't think it's a lot to ask for 900 goaltending in today's NHL. There are guys out there. There are goalies who need opportunities. And the Oilers, they did go get Connor Ingram, who is still marinating in the AHL, who is still working his way back after missing last season. I don't think he's going to give you 40 starts down the second half of the year, maybe 5 to 10. The Oilers need another goalie in here. And with each passing day, the price is going up, the desperation's going up, and everyone's going to lose their minds a little bit more every day. But that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everybody that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Everybody who has helped make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Be sure to check out Locked On NHL and Locked On NHL Game Night, where the guys break down every game every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. Be sure to subscribe to Locked On Oilers wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.